clouds and precipitation. Now, before we start, let me give you a broad structure of the things which I am going to discuss. In the first few minutes, I'll be giving you some broad introduction of clouds. Then I'll be discussing one measure for moisture in the atmosphere called relative humidity. And having discussed that, we will see today that how Mother Nature most often makes clouds for us. And having understood the formation of clouds, we will go for a simple but very important classification scheme for clouds, which was given more than 200 years back by a British scholar. Though it's very simple but very important for our examination purpose, and otherwise also for having understanding of clouds which we see up in the atmosphere, that classification is very good or useful kind of a approach, the system for comprehension of the diversity of clouds. Having discussed the classification of clouds, I'll be going for a phenomenon called cloud burst, and having discussed cloud burst, I'll be giving you two hypotheses to explain the process of precipitation, and then thereafter we'll be going for a term seeding of clouds, or what is called cloud seeding in general, and then we'll be going for types and forms of precipitation. Now, let me first figure out a few important generalization, a few important things. The first is that, as you know with your own practical experience, that all precipitation in the world comes from clouds, but all clouds do not give us precipitation. Now remember one rule, one point, that science up to cloud formation is all well understood. Means today we know very clearly how Mother Nature makes clouds for us. But thereafter, what happens within a cloud which gives us precipitation is still not fully understood. Though we have understood a lot, but we have not reached that level where we can provide a final complete theory on precipitation. And that's the reason I mentioned that we'll be talking about two hypotheses which attempt explaining the process of precipitation. Now, having said that precipitation is not fully understood, so we will be doing hypothesis on it. Let us now also go for a few general points, and that is perhaps the starting point for understanding clouds formation, that moisture holding capacity of air is a function of its temperature, and the rule is warmer air holds more moisture. Now this would be my basic observation to take you to that understanding how do we get clouds being formed in the atmosphere. So let us understand the cloud formation, or before that what is cloud, in the easiest possible way. Means I make a simplified presentation on the board. See here, we have water in the atmosphere, and we have water in the atmosphere present in the form of moisture in vapor. So water which is on the earth's surface is getting converted into vapor, and this vapor is held in the air. Now you know from basic school science that water gets converted to vapor, and in this process the latent heat is absorbed. So I repeat, water is on the earth's surface, gets converted into vapor, and water, the moisture, is held in the air in this vapor form. Now, though this statement which I have written on the board is very simple, but it has a great significance for us for understanding our nature. Now remember, this molecule of vapor which is present in the air is now a source of energy in itself. Whenever this vapor will change itself back into water droplet, or when this vapor will change itself into ice crystal, it is going to release that latent heat. It means this vapor which is present in the air is a source of energy. And though it's little early, but I would take a chance to make a very important observation which you will understand more and more as we go further with the lecture today. See, the air, the atmosphere in the tropical areas has abundance of moisture in it, and we will see that this moisture will result into cloud formation. And when that cloud formation will take place, that is condensation will take place, we will have release of latent heat. And as I go towards the higher latitude, the amount of moisture in the atmosphere keeps decreasing. So it means latent heat in the middle and higher latitude during condensation would be much less than what we have in the tropical areas. So one thumb rule I can make, though it's again I repeat very early, but many of you will perhaps understand, that in general I can say the atmospheric phenomena would be more destructive in the tropical areas, because most of these atmospheric phenomena would involve condensation and tremendous amount of release of latent heat as such. Whereas in the middle and higher latitude, the release of latent heat would be much less. So the destructive nature of atmospheric phenomena in general decreases as I go from equator to the poles. And that understanding I get from here, because vapor in our atmosphere in the tropical areas is really in abundance, and it has capacity to release enormous quantities of latent heat. Though it's early, I repeat, but let me just show you what is going to come in the discussions further, that when there is a tropical cyclone, we have a huge cloud attached to it. Now, in the lecture today, we will be naming this cloud under the classification scheme as a cumulonimbus cloud. Cumulo would refer to the shape of the cloud, later you will understand, and nimbus would mean that it's a rain-bearing cloud. You will be surprised to know that every tropical cyclone has a cloud attached to it which is called cumulonimbus cloud, and this cloud is having a beginning from a height or a base of about 2 to 3 kilometers from the earth's surface, and it is extended vertically, it is developed vertically to the heights as 13, 14, 15 kilometers. Means imagine from a height of 2 to 3 kilometers to 14, 15 kilometers of vertical development. It means it's a huge vertically developed cloud. Cloud means condensation, and condensation means vapor is changing itself into water droplets or ice crystals. And in this condensation or sublimation that vapor is going for, there would be so much of release of latent heat in this cloud that scientists say that this cloud in a tropical cyclone is like a packet of bombs in it. Means there are many bombs in it, and that is what makes one major reason for these cyclones to be so destructive in nature. Now, all this would be understood better in a technical way later. So, at this moment I leave it. Let us reach to this understanding in a more sequential way. So, this is my starting point. Air holds moisture. The moisture holding capacity of air is a function of its temperature, and the rule is warmer air holds more moisture. So, water becomes vapor, vapor is held in the atmosphere. Now, you asked me what is cloud formation. I make it simple by saying cloud formation is simply when the vapor which is present in the air changes itself into water droplets, liquid droplets, and or this vapor converts itself into ice crystals. This is basically what we call as cloud formation. Now, let us bring school science into this presentation. When vapor changes itself into water droplets, this is what we call in school science as condensation. And when vapor becomes straight away the ice crystal, I call it as sublimation. Though some students will comment that sublimation they have done as a term from solid to gas. But remember, sublimation can be used as a term for even gas to solid. Though another term we have for gas to solid is deposition. But remember, sublimation as a term can be used for both gas to solid or solid to gas conversion. So I prefer using the word sublimation, as most of the books also do. So what is cloud formation? Vapor of the atmosphere condenses itself into water droplets, or vapor sublimes itself into ice crystals. Now the question in the mind next would be that, sir, when does it happen that you have water droplets? Then answer is, it all relates to theoretically a temperature which is called as dew point. When dew point is more than 0 degrees centigrade, then it is the formation of water droplets. And when the dew point is less than 0 degrees centigrade, theoretically speaking, we expect the vapor to sublime itself into ice crystal. Now, those of you who are not very clear about dew point, then just understand it at this moment as some special temperature, and later you will understand what it is. Later in a technical sequential way, we'll reach to this particular point. Now, let me add something more. As I said, when vapor is converting itself into water droplets or ice crystal, there would be release of latent heat. So I write here in the center, in this whole process, latent heat is released. So basically, look at this. This box makes you understand in the easiest and the most simplified way what is cloud formation. So cloud formation is vapors condensation and or sublimation into water droplets or ice crystals, right? Now, if from this moment onward, if I use the word condensation, please do also include sublimation in that. It means if I say water droplets are formed in the clouds, it means I'm also including ice crystals there, right? So I may not speak all the time all the four things: condensation, sublimation, water droplets and ice crystal. So I'll be using broadly the word condensation for cloud formation and the formation of water droplets in the cloud. Okay. Now, if this is all making sense that this is cloud formation, we raise the next question here to take our discussion further, that if this vapor was present in the air, what would compel this vapor to change itself, to shed itself into water droplet or ice crystal? The answer is something very mechanical. It is something like, I have a capacity to hold some particular amount of load on my shoulder and stands erect on the earth surface. It's very natural that if the load is to my capacity on the shoulder, you may start expecting that I may make that load fall on the ground. For example, if the past experience tells me that I can hold 100 kgs load maximum on my shoulder and still stand erect on the platform and deliver my lecture. Now, if the load which I am holding on the shoulder is less than 100 kgs, you may not have a reason to expect that I am going to make that load fall on the ground. But the moment it is 100 kgs, you will start expecting that the teacher may make the load fall on the ground. So it's something like our atmosphere, the same is in atmosphere, that if the air of a given area holds the moisture to its capacity, then theoretically speaking, we can expect that it might get compelled now to shed that vapor into water droplet or ice crystals. Now, so it means my summation is, for clouds to form, the first necessary condition or first prerequisite is that air must hold moisture to its capacity. And you know that moisture holding capacity of air is a function of its temperature. So temperature of the air will decide what is the maximum capacity the air has to hold moisture. And you know, when air holds moisture to its capacity at a particular temperature, that is called saturation of air. So it means for clouds to form, one theoretical prerequisite is that air must be saturated. It means air must hold moisture to its capacity. Something like, you expect me to make the load fall on the ground if the load on my shoulder is the maximum, that is 100 kgs. Now, the cloud formation process needs one more prerequisite. What is that? If I am holding some load on my shoulder and I am not able to hold it anymore, so I want to shed it, I will be looking for some space where I can make that load shed on the ground. Same way, for air to shed its moisture, air also needs some small particles in the atmosphere on which the air can shed its vapor for condensation or sublimation. It means in the air there must be small particulate matter like dust particles, like pollutants in the atmosphere, or like suspensions we get from the fires in the forests of the world, or we may get some small particles from volcanic eruptions of the world. So if this is a particle in the atmosphere and this is the vapor molecule needs this particle for condensing itself over it or subliming itself over it. So basically, cutting it short, my summation is, for clouds to form, the air of a given region must be saturated. That air must come to hold moisture to its capacity, and second, the air must have a sufficient amount of small particulate matter which we call as condensation or sublimation nuclei. Means we must have the particles in the atmosphere over which these vapor molecules can go and condense or sublime themselves. So two conditions for cloud formation now I believe you have understood. Air must be saturated, means air must come to hold moisture to its capacity at the given temperature, and second, the air must have sufficiency of the particulate matter for providing condensation and or sublimation nuclei. Now, the second point, that there must be particulate matter in the atmosphere, I do not have much to speak on this, because generally the rule is that air almost world over has the particles from different sources. So this is generally available to us, and the country we live in and the city I am talking about from, that is Delhi, is full of pollution. So pollutants also will provide these condensation nuclei. So basically what I am saying is that second is not a big issue. There is not for me to speak on much here. It means my whole discussion from here onward for the cloud formation would revolve around how does Mother Nature makes the air of a given region saturated so that it can result into cloud formation. So let's talk about the first condition, that saturation of air. Now, to make some logical statements about the air's saturation, first we need to have a measure about the moisture content in the air. You know, moisture content in the air is referred to as humidity in the atmosphere, and the humidity as a concept is measured, is quantified in three different ways in our school science. One is we have a concept called absolute humidity. Second is specific humidity. But these two are not important in my today's lecture. I can make you understand the formation of clouds in nature with the most popular third concept which is there for humidity, and that is relative humidity. And in short, I'll be referring to it as RH. So today, in the next part of the discussion, you will find relative humidity is the key tool to understand cloud formation in nature. And before we use it for the cloud formation understanding, we need to know little about this concept also for direct questions in prelims on the very topic RH, the relative humidity. So let's understand what is relative humidity of the atmosphere in the simplest way. See here, imagine the air outside in the atmosphere has temperature T at this moment. And let's suppose further that this air which is there in my area outside in the atmosphere, which is at temperature T, is holding m units of moisture in it. And I represent this situation by writing the symbol MT. So MT denotes that the air of my area has moisture M in it when the temperature of the air is T. So MT represents the moisture in the air at temperature T. If I take this moisture the air holds at temperature T as a ratio of the maximum moisture the same air can hold at the same temperature T, then this ratio of what the moisture air has at a given temperature to what it can maximum hold at the same temperature T, this is what is called as relative humidity. And generally it is presented in percentage. Now, so RH is the ratio of the moisture the air holds at a particular temperature to the maximum it can hold at the same temperature too. So I say what it has to what it can maximum hold is what we call as RH, the relative humidity. Now, if you understand this definition, let me tell you now two important things about this relative humidity which can be useful for your preliminary examination, and then thereafter I'll be using this concept to make clouds in my presentation. Now see here, imagine if the question is, and this has been there in UPSC in different ways, that at what time of the day, mind the words carefully, at what time of the day in general at a given place the RH is going to be maximum, and at what time of the day in general at a given place the RH is going to be minimum. I repeat my point. Imagine this question that in general at what time of the day for a given place the RH is going to be maximum and RH is going to be minimum. Now see, to answer this question you first should know that in general for a given place the temperature of the day is the highest at late afternoon. Now many students misunderstand that temperature for a given place is the highest at local noon time when the sun is highest in the sky. No, remember local 12 noon, as we discussed earlier in the concept of time, the sun is highest in the sky. But remember, everything takes time in life. Sun would take some time to heat us. So the highest temperature of a given place in general is at late afternoon, somewhere between 2 to 3 p.m. or even little later, depending on the conditions of that area. So I repeat my point, in general, this is important. For a given place, the highest temperature of the day is late afternoon. Now, if you understand this point, then look at this particular ratio. Now, can I say that for a given, mind this now, for a given motion in the numerator, at late afternoon, the holding capacity would become very high, because the holding capacity is very high for the reason at late afternoon the temperature is the highest, and you know higher temperature can make the air hold more moisture. So it means at late afternoon, when the temperature of the day is the highest for a given place, the denominator would be at its peak. So I repeat, for a given numerator, if the denominator is at its peak, then this ratio will become minimum. So it means, what is the conclusion? At what time of the day in general for a given place the RH reaches its minimum? It is at late afternoon. I repeat, at late afternoon for a given unit of moisture in the numerator, the holding capacity in the denominator would be at its peak. So for a given numerator, if the denominator is at its peak, the ratio will become minimum. Now let's see the opposite. Now we need to know for the second answer that in general for a given place, at what time of the day temperature is the lowest. So I repeat, in general for a given place, at what time of the day the temperature is the lowest, then the answer is that it is just before sunrise in the morning, that is at dawn. And those of you who study through the night, they know it better, that there comes a time when you feel little colder and you stand to close the window of the room, and when you peep outside you find sun is not visible but there is diffused illumination in the sky. It means it's just the time before sunrise called dawn, and that is the moment of the time or the day when you have the lowest temperature for the whole day in general. So let's look at now the ratio RH. If for a given numerator the holding capacity is the minimum, because see at dawn temperature is the lowest, holding capacity would be at its lowest. So for a given numerator, if the denominator is at its lowest, this ratio will become the highest. So I conclude my observation. In general, for a given place, RH reaches its minimum value at late afternoon, and it reaches its maximum value at dawn, that is early morning before sunrise. Is okay? Now, some of you may have a problem in your mind that sir, even the numerator can change. Yes, I do agree that numerator, the moisture which is there in the air in a given area may change. A new parcel of air may come from another area into my area, and the moisture amount may change. But do remember, if I say numerator can change and denominator you already have seen it changes with the temperature of the day, then the only thing we can conclude is RH keeps changing throughout the day. So remember, for these salient observations, we need to keep numerator as a constant and then see that in general for a given place at what time of the day the RH reaches its highest and the minimum value. Okay, so you have to hold the numerator constant for answering such questions. Now let's come to one more point, and thereafter I'll be using this concept of RH to make clouds in this lecture. Now see, generally our perception is that the air of a desert would have less moisture content than the air of a forest or a grassland, let's say non-desert area. I repeat my point. Generally the perception in our mind and the rule in nature will be that the moisture content in the air of a desert region would be less than the moisture content in the air of a non-desert region, that is forest or grassland. But I wish to add that there is a possibility, I am not saying always, remember, there is a possibility, you must know as a student of geography and ecology, that the air of a tropical desert, or should I say the air of a particular desert in tropical region like Sahara may have, I'm not saying always, may have more moisture than the air of a non-desert like a forest or grassland in the temperate region. Means imagine this is area A, the tropical desert like Sahara, and this is area B, which is a forest or a grassland in the middle latitude. My summation is that yes, most often the moisture content in the air of a desert may be less than the moisture content in the air of a non-desert like grassland or forest. But you must understand there is a possibility that desert like Sahara, which is a tropical desert, which has very high temperatures, may have more moisture in its air than the moisture in the air of a non-desert region in temperate belt. Now why this possibility is there? Because you need to understand that moisture content in the air of Sahara may be more than moisture content in the air of a non-desert in temperate region. But the problem with Sahara is that though MA may be good, but the denominator, the maximum holding capacity of moisture in this air in Sahara is very high, because air is very hot. So even if the numerator is good, the ratio RH is not good, because the denominator is very large. So the point you need to understand is that it is more a game about the RH which relates to the clouds and precipitation and hence the vegetation, rather than just the absolute amount of moisture. So it means in the next part of the lecture you will see, for clouds to form and for us to get precipitation and a particular type of vegetation associated with that, the major focus is of the nature not on absolute amount but on the relative humidity as such. So numerator is good in desert like Sahara sometimes, but what is not good is the RH, because holding capacity is very big and RH becomes low, and you will see in the next part of the lecture, if RH is low, then nature will not be able to make clouds, and if clouds are not there, you will not have precipitation, and then the region would have a reason to become a desert vegetation region. Whereas the good thing about the middle latitudes would be that even if MB is not good, the holding capacity the air has here is also not very big. So the ratio of the moisture the air has to what it can hold is on higher side. And the discussion which follows will make you understand under such conditions nature may have more chances to make clouds, and if clouds are there you will have more precipitation, and that precipitation will bring the vegetation which is more grassland or forest. So it means it's more a game about relative humidity rather than the absolute amount of moisture in the air for the clouds and the precipitation. This is what would be focused in my next part of the lecture. So with these two important observations, I now take you to the formation of clouds in nature. Now see, to make you understand clouds formation, let us talk about the concept I have taught you in my earlier classes, and that is column of air. What is column of air? The vertical atmosphere over a particular area with a particular identity of its own is what we call as column of air. So imagine this line represents the earth surface, and this is the vertical atmosphere over this area. In my previous classes I have given you notion that our atmosphere and the earth surface have a relationship with each other, and as a result of the relationship, the vertical atmosphere over a particular area may develop a particular identity of its own. So when the vertical atmosphere over a particular area develops a particular identity of its own, then this vertical atmosphere is what I call as column of air. And this column of air can be distinguished from a column of air over the near region. If I give you a particular example, imagine this area is Sahara Desert. So column of air over it would have a particular identity which is different from the column of air over nearby, let's say Atlantic Ocean. So column of air, I repeat, is the vertical atmosphere over a particular area with a particular identity of its own. Now, to make my presentation little closer to you, let us suppose this is area, my own area, and as a small say replica of that larger region of the nature as such. Now, I'll be teaching you in very simple straightforward way, how does Mother Nature make clouds most often in a given area like this. Now let's set some parameters here. Let's suppose this area which I am referring to has a height h0, and on a particular day, early morning, I am assuming certain parameters for making my presentation clearly understood. I repeat, I assume this is my area and this is at height h0, and let's say on a particular day, early morning before sunrise, the temperature of the place was T0. Means the air has a temperature T0 near the earth's surface. This air which is in the column near the ground has temperature T0, and I am saying it's before sunrise. And let's suppose the RH of the air in this region near the earth's surface on that particular day before sunrise in the morning was 70%. And for the sake of simplification, I write that 70% as 70 units of moisture in the numerator divided by 100 units of moisture. Though I know these figures may not be the exact figures in reality when we deal with the moisture, but when I write 70 units and 100 units here, I can certainly use these figures. So this is my starting point, that I am referring to my own area. Let's say height of this place is h0, temperature of the air on a particular day early morning before sunrise was T0, and the RH of the air is near the earth's surface 70%, and I take it as 70 by 100 units. Now let us suppose nature wants to make clouds here on the ground itself. Now you know nature doesn't make clouds on the ground that often. Most of the clouds of the nature are formed away from the earth's surface. Yes, we do have condensation occurring near the earth's surface. For example, on a winter night in a city like Delhi, we do have the condensation resulting in fog, mist, haze, etc. But that process is little different from most often cases we have in the nature. The more of the rule of the nature is to make clouds at a height from the earth's surface. So today in this lecture, I am discussing about the clouds which are generally formed in the nature, and they are formed away from the earth's surface, about the condensation on the earth's surface which results in fog, mist, haze, etc. The discussions would be separately done under some other lecture. We are dealing with those clouds which are more often formed away from the earth's surface. So as a child you might have wondered that why don't we have clouds on the earth's surface? Why do we have most of the clouds away from the earth's surface? You will understand it within a few minutes now. So let's go in a hypothetical way that on that particular day, early morning before sunrise, nature wanted to make clouds right on the ground itself in my area. And you know, for clouds formation, we need two things. We need, number one, air must be saturated. What does it mean when air must be saturated, theoretically speaking? That is, RH must be 100% in a theoretical way. And second, there must be sufficient amount of condensation or sublimation nuclei. Means there must be sufficient amount of particles there. I said second is not an issue. Generally these particles are there, and more so in the polluted areas of the world we have abundance of it. So it means the whole issue is about how does Mother Nature achieve saturation. So if nature wanted to make clouds right on the ground itself, nature finds particles are available near the earth's surface, but the problem is that air of this area is not saturated for resulting in condensation or sublimation. Now nature finds that this air is short by how many units of moisture? It is short by 30 units. So let us suppose in a hypothetical way, nature plans for strategy 1. Remember, I am saying this all hypothetically just to make my subject easily understood. That nature plans for strategy 1 and nature tells itself, let me wait for my agent called sun. Because when the sun would rise, this area will get heated up. So nature tells itself, let me plan for strategy 1, that sun will rise in this area, and when the sun will heat this area, there would be loss of moisture from the earth's surface, that is evaporation, and there would be loss of moisture from the plants, etc. So there would be transpiration, and the two losses can add moisture, the vapor in the atmosphere of this area, the air of this area. So nature plans hypothetically, in my understanding, for strategy 1, that it waits for sun to rise in the region, and sun, once it rises, will lead to evaporation and transpiration, and that can add moisture in the numerator, the air of the given area. But nature has found that this strategy 1 doesn't work much often, because this strategy is highly complicated. The problem with this strategy is, by the time the sun would heat my area, to add 30 more units of moisture in the numerator, the temperature of this area will not remain T0, temperature will become more than T0, and if the temperature is more than T0, by the time you have 100 here, the holding capacity in the denominator will become more than 100, because temperature has become more than T0. So I repeat my point, that strategy 1, that I wait for sun to rise in this area and sun would heat and add more moisture in the numerator. The problem with this strategy is, by the time the heat of the sun would add 30 more units of moisture in the numerator, the temperature of this area would become more than T0, and as a result, holding capacity would become more than 100 in the denominator. It means even if there is 100 in the numerator, since the denominator has become more than 100, so the ratio will not reach to 100%. It means this is a complicated route, that sun heats this area and more moisture is added, but the holding capacity also keeps increasing, and it doesn't serve the purpose. So nature understands this complication because of its so much of experience, I would say. So nature drops this strategy of making clouds at the ground itself. Nature goes for easier strategy. And what is that strategy? It seems that nature knows little of mathematics. That if the purpose is only to increase this ratio, the nature understands that easier way is that I should make something which can reduce the denominator for a given numerator. It means, let me hold the numerator as it is and do something which can reduce the holding capacity of moisture in the air. And you know, if the denominator gets reduced for a given numerator, the ratio will start increasing. And you know, holding capacity of moisture, holding capacity of air, the moisture holding capacity of air will get reduced if the air is made to cool. You know, as the air will cool, its holding capacity becomes less than what it was earlier. And you know from my previous lectures, when air rises up, it gets adiabatically cooled, and if the air is getting cooled, its holding capacity will decrease. And if the holding capacity decreases for a given numerator, the RH as a ratio will start increasing. So it means nature goes for strategy 2 most often. And what is that? Nature makes the air of a given area rise, and as it rises, it gets adiabatically cooled, and as it gets cooled, its holding capacity gets decreased, and for a given numerator, its RH keeps increasing. And if the air has risen sufficiently to a particular height, then this air might achieve 100% RH, it may get saturated, and it may result in condensation, and hence cloud formation. So let's see, how does nature make the air rise? Now, so it means everyone is with me on the point For most of the clouds formation, nature goes for upliftment of air so that its holding capacity starts reducing and its ratio RH keeps increasing and air gets saturated. So now the question is, what are the mechanisms available with Mother Nature for upliftment of air in different parts of the world? So I repeat, that mechanism with which nature makes most of the clouds is upliftment. And what are the major mechanisms with which air of a given region can be uplifted? Now you will see in next 5 minutes that Mother Nature has 3 major mechanisms for upliftment of air. One is, nature can heat one area more than the other area. When one area is heated more than the other area, the air of the heated area, more heated area, would become warmer, and warmer air is lighter, and this lighter air would start rising. So it means one method, one mechanism for upliftment of air is that make one area hotter than the other. And you know, when warm air rises, we call it as convection. It's a process of heat transfer. So it means one mechanism for upliftment of air available in the world, in the nature, is convection. Second, Mother Nature may not have heat everywhere for air to rise. So the second mechanism with the nature for air to be uplifted is a physical barrier in the path of the wind or the air. So imagine, if the air is coming from this direction and there is a physical feature like a plateau or a mountain, and this side of the mountain which is facing the wind would be called as windward side, and the other side would be the leeward side. So what is going to happen? When the air would strike the windward side of the mountain or any other physical feature, the air would be forced to rise, and on the leeward side the air would descend down. Now air as it rises will get cooled, holding capacity of air, the moisture holding capacity will decrease, RH will increase, and on the windward side of the mountain you will have condensation, cloud formation and heavy precipitation. And on the leeward side, one, the air has already shed its moisture, and second, as it descends, you have learned in my classes, descending air gets automatically warmed, and when the air will get warmed, for a given numerator, the holding capacity will start increasing, and if the holding capacity starts increasing, the ratio will start decreasing, the RH ratio will start decreasing, and you will not have clouds formation. So you will find on the leeward side of the mountain, you will have the rain shadow effect or rain shadow zone being formed. Now, to make it better understood, I can give India's example here, that during the southwest summer monsoon season, the Western Ghats would be the physical barrier, and you can look at this western side of Western Ghats would be the windward side of the mountain, and that is why you have heavy precipitation in this area. And you also know from ecology classes, the Western Ghats make one ecological hotspot for the country. And look at the eastern side of the Western Ghats. This would be the leeward side of the mountain, and here, you know, in this area of India, the interior of the plateau region in south is a rain shadow zone, and that is why it has less moisture for irrigation and other purposes of life. Now when a physical barrier is making the air go up, and since most often the mountains act as barriers, so the scholars of the world have taken a Greek word oro, which represents mountains, and we call this method or this mechanism as orographic. So at this moment, you know there are two mechanisms on the board for upliftment of air to result into condensation and cloud formation. One is the heat, the convection, and second is the mountain or any other physical feature barrier, and we call it as orographic. Now let's come to the third major mechanism which is available for air's upliftment, and that is something we have referred number of times in our classes, and it is called front. Now let's revise that once again. Now you know from my previous lecture that in the middle latitudes we have a temperate low pressure belt. And low pressure belt is a zone of convergence of two contrasting air masses, the cold dry polar air mass and the warm and moist subtropical or tropical air mass, warm and moist. And as I said earlier in my classes many times, that Norwegian scientists studied this phenomenon in middle latitudes at the time of the First World War, and they discovered that when two contrasting air masses meet in the middle latitude, now let's say I'm standing in the middle latitudes here, these are polar areas and these are tropical areas. My right hand is the warm moist tropical air mass and the polar air mass is cold and dry here. And when these two air masses meet, they do not mix into each other, and there is a zone of transition formed here. And Norwegian scientists, taking the analogy from the war, they call that zone of transition as a front. And do appreciate, whenever there is a front, sooner or later, the warmer air being lighter would start rising. And as it rises, it will get automatically cooled. And as it cools, ratio RH will start increasing and will get condensation, that is cloud formation. So it means we can say the third major mechanism for air's upliftment for cloud formation is front, a front as a mechanism. So it means at this moment you understand Mother Nature has three major mechanisms for upliftment of air for clouds formation.